from the history of arts and architecture, Robin Kelsey.
Well, I could get used to that. Michael Fontaine, Spearhead, every day in class. Okay, so you've had the cold, hard facts, you've had the scientific objectivity of history from Jill Lepore, and now you're going to think with your heart, right? We're going to talk about the baseball card. And I'm going to start with one of my favorite cards, a Hank Aaron from 1970. I believe that one should only teach what one knows about. It's a rule that I violate every time I teach in my own department. But tonight, I'm not going to violate it. I am going to speak only about baseball cards that I own. So all the cards you will see are from my personal collection, assembled between the ages of 8 and 14, except for the occasional purchase afterward. So my focus is going to be on the first 25 years or so of the modern baseball card, which is usually dated to 1952. This is a period that was dominated by Topps, essentially a monopoly in card production, so almost all the cards we'll be seeing are Topps cards. One of the reasons I love the Aaron card is because of that extraordinarily candid expression and also the surprising delicacy with which he holds the ball. Here is a 1969 Harmon Killebrew, a player I fairly worshipped when I was young, growing up in Minnesota, and a Hall of Famer who died this past May. The baseball card, I would suggest, is a two-sided biography of few words. It delivers a character to our imagination through varied forms of evidence, orchestrated into a coherent and standardized whole. And when I was young, these characters were more real to me, more inspiring, and certainly more comforting than many of the people with whom I interacted day to day. You can see I'm not nearly as hard-headed as my historian colleague. On the front of the baseball card is a smoothly finished surface bearing, in the paradigmatic case, a portrait of the player in question, identified by name, team, and sometimes position. And although some early sets of Topps cards used a painted representation, the standard quickly became photographic. On the back is a surface that's rough and fibrous, a mixture of grubby document and popular pulp. And I actually love the different tactility of the front and back of the baseball card. I'm actually going to consider the back first, this back of Dick Allen, quite a character and prodigious batter. And this is the back of his 1974 Topps card. You can see those paper fibers, which you can feel on the card itself. On the back, the biographical information is largely quantitative. We have height, weight, birth date, and then, of course, the centerpiece is this statistical history of the player's performance over the years. The Topps company and its cards were, in fact, crucial agents in the establishment of statistics as the language of baseball. In fact, Topps actually tabulated a lot of these statistics in the early years. For obsessive fans such as myself, this matrix is an endless reserve of delight and fascination. And to this statistical grid are added a few anecdotes, as well as a signature, another way to establish identity. And all these pieces work in concert to establish a kind of imagined personhood. There's also the wonderful graphic anecdote, which appears on cards in many years. This one informing us that Dick likes to listen to stereo music, which, if that sounds odd now, you should know that it sounded odd in 1974. And finally, there's a number in the upper corner, which is actually the number that belongs to the archive of baseball cards. And it's not an entirely arbitrary number, because if you were a good player, you got a better number. Usually the numbers ending in 0 are reserved for good players, such as Dick Allen. Ending in 5 was also good. Ending in 3 or 7 meant you were not so important.
What's Luke's Rookie of the Year?
What's that?
It says Luke's Rookie of the Year. What's Luke?
In the previous card?
Yeah. Was Luke's Rookie of the Year?
Yeah, Loop is the national, refers to the National League in that.
They let anybody.
In that context. I'm not going there. Okay, so this is the back of Hank Aaron's card. One of the things I remember so vividly collecting baseball cards was when you had somebody with a really long career, the card on the back got really serious. There was no room for graphic cartoons, no room for anecdotes. It was just solid career. By that time, you didn't need the anecdotes. If you didn't know who Hank Aaron was, you had no business collecting baseball cards. Notice the number 500, right? Hank is going to get one of the best. Here is a Vita Blue card from 1971. He's on the verge of his breakout season. He's already thrown a no-hitter despite the very few games he's played. But I show it because there were years in which Topps decided just to do the most recent season and then the career statistics, which I always love the fact that it said life, right, which somehow got to the essence of the question. I actually hated these backs, though, because I thought that we were being robbed of the statistical richness to which we were entitled. All right, in 1953, Topps did a vertical format. Interesting because although you have very scanty batting statistics, you actually get some fielding record, which was highly unusual. Notice the signature running across the list of anecdotes. So that's about the back. Now about the front. Here are two 1958 cards, Von McDaniel and Don Zimmer looking younger than any of us ever believed he could have. Okay. So although the basic format of the baseball card and its archive is egalitarian, right, everyone gets one card, the back of the playing card clearly separated the Von McDaniels from the Hank Aarons. Von, unfortunately, only played one season, so enjoy his picture here. The front of the card, however, was more radically equal. That is to say, everyone got their picture, their name, the same size. You couldn't tell from the front whether Von McDaniel was the Roy Halladay of his day or, in fact, the Von McDaniel of his day. It's the back of the card that humbles him. And there are two standard portrait types. The one is the bust, and the other is the pose, the ready-for-action pose, as you see here. And you notice in these early cards, the background is just a solid color, this kind of amorphous halo, turning these into quasi-religious icons, which I certainly treated them as. Later, they took away those solid color backgrounds, and we got to see what was behind the players. And this made the artificiality of the scene rather conspicuous. Is Bill Freehan in this 1965 card on the left actually about to catch a pitch, despite his straight from central casting pugnacious catcher look? I think not. And what exactly is Mickey Lolich in this 1975 card really doing? Is he about to break a windshield out in the parking lot? These players do not look like they are in the midst of action. But I actually find these poses one of the charms of early baseball cards, in part because they make the artifice of creating this stilled moment in time, this capturing of this moment in time. They actually, in some way, at least implicitly, acknowledge that, if not thematize it, that this moment will, in fact, last as long as the shoebox in the attic, which, by the way, it took me a long time to reach when I was asked to do this talk, but it was all worth it. It was all worth it. Okay. In the early 1970s, Topps began experimenting with cards that actually represented real action in games. So you have these 1974 cards of Ralph Garr and Johnny Bench. What you gained in authenticity in these scenes, you kind of lost in intimacy. And it's interesting that in at least one year, Topps, I noticed, included two cards for players where it had an action card and then also the standard portrait card, as though that loss of intimacy was too great a cost. But the standard card throughout this era, even once the action cards are introduced, are the portrait cards, and again in the bust form and in the ready-for-action pose. I love these two, in part because of Turk Farrell being with the Colt 45s at that time. Also the fact that the back of the card tells you the Turk was called Dick, which I think is interesting because if your name is Turk, you don't need a nickname, right? So I don't understand that. The other thing that's interesting in the Tony Oliva card is it says 1963 All-Star Rookie. It should say 64. And those little mistakes baseball card collectors love, right? It's like the stamp that's printed wrong or something. People get very excited about it and no one else quite understands. Okay. So I want to say a few words about the relationship between baseball cards and the history of photography, which is my field within the history of art. And I would say that that radical egalitarian character of the baseball card very much draws upon a notion that photography, and the photographic portrait in particular, has historically been an agent of social equality. And that is what Frederick Douglass, shown in this wonderful 1855 daguerreotype portrait, thought. He thought the daguerreotype was the greatest invention of the 19th century because the camera didn't care who you were. It was going to represent you in the same way, and you could put your visage into history. And I think that egalitarian spirit carries over in the baseball card. I also think the baseball card traffics in the idea that the photograph is not simply a representation of a particular time and place, but actually a physical trace of that time and place, a kind of relic of the past. And here's a wonderful daguerreotype actually in the Schlesinger Library here at Harvard of an actress in the 19th century, Anna Cora Moat. You can see it's got a lock of her hair and her autograph and some rosemary, these little mementos. And that sense of recollection of having this relic of the past is something that carries through, I think, in the baseball card. And more directly, in the 1850s and 1860s, people began to collect cards of famous people, celebrities, with autographs on them. This one of Garfield before he was president. This was when he was a brigadier general during the Civil War. He probably had a good season and got a nice card. And on the right, Bob Feller. This is from 1952. This is the first year of the modern baseball card put out by Topps with the statistics on the back. I'm happy to say I got this in a trade with the father of a friend of mine who lived around the corner, who never forgave me for that trade. I traded him some 1951 football cards, and of course the economy of baseball cards is another matter entirely. But you can see that connection, and in fact the earliest baseball cards, not the one with the statistics on the back, actually date back to the 1860s. Also, the action card has a long history in terms of the photography of bodies in motion. Here at Edward Muybridge from the 1880s, and you could draw a lineage between that and the Brooks Robinson card, although I have to say, even though an aesthetic emerges in the later 19th century for the body in this kind of contorted pose, I think most of us wouldn't find the Brooks Robinson image that flattering. Although it's odd, because he just come off winning the MVP of the 1970 World Series, you know, the series in which Pete Rose said he belonged in a higher league. All these, thinking about this history, got me thinking about the conjunction of the portrait and statistical information about the sitter. And actually, the place that you find this in the 19th century is in the police file. This is a Bertillon police file card from Paris. It was a system that became internationally popular, where you see the statistics around the person's face. A reminder that being introduced into the archive is not only honorific in some cases, but also disciplinary. And of course, this is true of those of us who hold Harvard ID cards, right? It's a source of pride. But that face connected to a number is actually used to track us, right, and make sure we don't do bad things. All right, I want to say just a moment about the materiality of the card. One of the things I love about baseball cards is that the material is so cheap, and yet it is somehow transmuted into something precious. This actually is a 1963 post-serial box card, which you actually had to cut out of the box. Cards, of course, were always associated with some other kind of product, whether bubblegum or tobacco, usually, in this case, cereal. They're fragile. You can see my Billy Martin somehow got folds in it. I'm sure it was not my fault. We're also reminded sometimes of the actual physical process by which they are made, and in some ways it has an odd effect in terms of the magic of the card, both by odd cutting, such as the awkward cut of the Billy Odell card, or sometimes the offset printing was a little offset, such as in this red Shindy card of 1969. There were also variations in size occasionally, a little bit rare, but here there's a Bazooka All-Time Greats card, which was a tiny card of Rogers Hornsby. On the left, that's from 1963. Denny McClain with a wonderful sneer, you know, after these best years are past him, on this 1971 Senators card. And then these giant cards that Topps produced in 70 and 71. This one seeming perfect for Boog Powell's enormous biceps working just fine for his proportions. Okay, there are also historical styles in cards I love when you go back to some of the painted portraits of the early years of 53 Topps of Davy Williams on the left. And then this one I love too, the peeling poster with the fake wood grain underneath it of this 1962 Johnny Logan. That was, I just can't imagine them sitting around and thinking these things up. Well, let's do imitation wood grain with the peeling poster. That would be great. In 1972, Jeff Burroughs with this wonderful Peter Max poster lettering at the top, right? I mean, it's clearly you're in the early 70s. And then just to give in a recent example, that metallic look is very much 21st century of the Joe Mauer from 2007. There's also historical hairstyles, such as the two 1975 cards, Mike Schmidt and Mike Cuellar, the Cuellar card notable for misspelling his name. Topps is, of course, exceedingly aware of the value of its own history, right? So it produces cards such as the Hank Aaron special card of 1974, and recently, in 2008, Justin Morneau in the form of a 1949 Bowman card. And now I'm going to rifle really fast through one of my favorite subjects, which is all the things they stick in a pack of cards that's not like the other cards. So I'm just going to go through really fast, like the team card here of the Cubs in 1971, AL RBI leaders 71, obviously a 72 card. This one I love, Run Preventers, 1959. I mean, Run Preventers, that's like wins over replacement. I mean, this is a long time ago. They got the, yeah, it's great. Okay. Juan Marichal, the all-star cards bursting out, Juan Marichal bursting out of the newspaper. Fleer put out in 70 and 71 these World Series cards. I've been thinking about 1918 recently, I don't know why, but I love this World Series card. Here is Brooks Robinson with one, having made one of his great plays, but it's this moment of heroism, and yet he looks absolutely desolate and enfeebled out there in the field. The isolation and vulnerability. I always get choked up when I see that card. These are wonderful. This is 1951. This is the year before Topps does the first really modern card. They do the red and blue back cards. They have redbacks and bluebacks. Here, Preacher Row and Dizzy Trout. And you could play a baseball game. You see the ball and strike. Here's another game, 1968, with Mantle, Torre, and Robinson. Here is 1969 Globe playing cards. Kurt Flood and Juan Marichal. Baseball highlights, 1960. You could see, I could just go on all night, but I'm going to stop soon. These are coins that came in the 1971 packs. Willie Mays and Rico Petrocelli. I have lots of these. If you really want one, we could talk. Okay. Rod Carew All-Star Selection 68. I love these cards because they had a puzzle piece on the back. And of course, I was clearly destined to be a photo historian when I figured out that this was Carl Yastrzemski's neck from a separate Carl Yastrzemski photo card in 1969. But again, in the end, it's really about biography. It's really about Sal Magley being 40 years old, making his comeback and having all that on the card. It's about freezing forever Nolan Ryan's stunning potential, but completely inaccurate pitching at this moment for the Mets, or Joe Nuxhall, looking like the oldest person who ever pitched, which is odd because he in fact was the youngest person to ever play in a Major League Baseball game. But now he's old, and you can see he's got this strange green plastic half sleeve coming out, which God knows what that's about. And I'm going to leave you in the end with Vita Blue giving you the peace sign in 1971. Thank you very much.